Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Bill Prazen. I'm skeptical every time I hear claims that finally, this year, lawmakers will reform the state's archaic school finance system. But this year, state leaders swear it's going to happen, and they point to a new report from the Texas School Finance Commission, a blue ribbon group of Texans charged to present solutions. Before the January legislative session, they say Texas should put in more than $1 billion new to public schools if they tie that money to specific outcomes. I sat down with commission member and the chair of public education in the House, Dan Huberty. With the school finance report just now published, let me get just your kind of temperature on it. Do you feel good about it?
Yeah, I feel good about it. I think, you know, we started in January of last year, and I think there was a lot of skeptical people. I was one of them, obviously, when we started this, because I really felt like we had an opportunity the last couple sessions to do some things. But, you know, hindsight, I look back at it and looked at what we did last session relative to school finance and what we were trying to get passed. But we took a real deep dive. I think we really landed in a great place. And but it's just a report. Yeah. So you know, now the real work begins.
It does seem like the commission has been. You guys trust each other.
Yep.
It's been pretty unified. And now, how big is that hurdle to get all the other lawmakers to trust what you guys did?
Well, I think, number one, when the report comes out, my hope is that my colleagues read it. That's number one. You know, we are going to encourage them all to read it. It is robust, it's complex, and you know, our goal as members of the House is to educate them. And you know, in visiting with Speaker Bonin, that's coming in, he's made school finance the #1 priority for the House. He said it. He said it when he was elected or got the votes. He's continued to say it. And so our goal and our jobs as members that support him and members that support public education for our children, the 5.4 million children, is to get that over the finish line. And what we have to do is it's going to be an education process. This will be the first time since really 1984 that the legislature is going to take this Herculean of a task of trying to create the new system. And so we have to get everybody to understand what we're doing and be patient and explain it. So it's not going to, you know, what I tell people is like, this is not going to happen in the first 2 weeks of the session.
You guys are recommending more than $1 billion in new money.
Well, look, I think what my perspective was, and I think many members, and including my colleagues in the House and the Senate, all said the same thing, that you know, the current formulas that we have are not working. You know, when you have what they call the CEI, which is the Cost of Education Index, it hasn't been addressed since 1990. And the Legislative Budget Board, one of their responsibilities statutorily is to review that on a biennium basis, and they haven't done that. And so we haven't kept up with it. So it doesn't work. And compensatory education hasn't been adjusted, you know, in over 30 years. And the English language learner weight hasn't been adjusted. All of those things just didn't work. But the interesting thing about it is that it also wasn't tied to any outcomes. And so, you know, Todd Williams chaired the outcomes group, and we said, look, we're spending billions of dollars, over $50 billion a year, but we don't have a business plan. And if you ran a business, you wouldn't spend $50 billion without some sort of, what do you get at the end? What do you expect? So the governor came out and said, look, we want a 60 by 30 plan. 60% of the students are going to graduate by 2030. But how do you get there? What's the path to get there? So Mr. Williams came up and said, look, you know what, in his group, and came out and said, you know what, every third grader should be able to read, right? Well, what does that cost? You know, and we should put money in early education. What does that cost? And so those are the cost parameters. Those are the new money that we're talking about, because we recognize that that's important. Yeah. We want to make sure that we're going to fund and put into programs that are outcome-based, that are solutions-based, that get results, and we're willing to pay for that. Just putting more money into it, just in keeping the system as it is, that is not an outcomes-based solution. That is not something that we can go sell. And I think that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat and you have kids, every third grader should read. That should be a standard in Texas today. And we don't have that. And so that's going to cost us resources to be able to do that. What our goal really is that people just need to be patient. Don't be critical. And look, I get it. You know, anything that you put out, that legislature or politicians put out, the job of, you know, of whether, you know, the journalists or anybody else is to find holes and poke holes in it. I understand that. But I think that if you look at how hard this commission worked, and we've had, you know, over 40 meetings, hundreds of hours of testimony, and being very thoughtful about what we have tried to put together, it's a package deal. And it's a package deal in the sense of property tax reform and school finance reform. They are going to work together, and I think that if everybody's patient, we are going to have an unbelievable, successful session.
I have seen the focus of focus on the problem and school finance before, but is there a different environment now, or is it just the right people are saying the right things that convinces you that it's going to happen this time?
There is a tremendous amount of support from what we would call the big three, the men that lead our state, and their leadership has said that this is what we're going to do. It's up to us members that have to execute the plan. And the great news is that you know, a partner that I have, you know, that we have in the Senate with Chairman Taylor, that we have, you know, agreed on a lot of these issues, and the nuances of what the legislation looks like ultimately may be different. We'll have different policy ideas on some of these things, but the beauty of it is that we're starting at a point where everybody recognizes that the eyes of Texas are upon us, and specifically the parents and the children, and we owe it to them to provide the best quality education that we can for them. And the men and women that are going to start working January 8th, every single one of them that I've met with and talked with have come up and said #1 priority for them is school finance and fixing the public education system. And that is a resounding theme across the state of Texas right now. And so I think, as Chairman Taylor said to me yesterday, he said the wind is at our back.
A school district financial chief helps shape recommendations for state lawmakers to overhaul the school finance system.
We all agree that the system is undeniably broken, right? There's, you know, wide disagreement about how to fix it.
She'll give us some insight on the fight to fix the system that pays for your child's schools and the battles still to come.
The agenda for this session will be public education, public education, public education.
The focus on school finance hits home, even for lawmakers who haven't taken office yet. We'll meet a new Texas lawmaker and see how she's bringing a unique perspective to the debate. You're watching State of Texas. We're joined now by Nicole Conley-Johnson, the Chief Financial Officer of AISD, our local school district, the largest in Central Texas. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
When we talk school finance, what are the basics of the problem in your view?
Well, I think it simply can be said that, you know, we all agree that the system is undeniably broken, right? There's, you know, wide disagreement about how to fix it. We're living under sort of outdated funding formulas that haven't kept up with the cost of providing education today at today's cost. It's highly reliant upon property taxes to fund an enormous portion of public education. And so the taxpayer fatigue, coupled with the need to invest more in the funding formulas, it doesn't keep up with inflation. It hasn't been meaningfully updated for about 30 years. We require more and more from our students, but we don't have the funding to always provide the necessary services to get them to where they need to be.
In a changing district like AISD, with enrollment going down, you know, we're talking about consolidating in schools. What kind of constraints does the school finance system put on a changing district? Like, why can't you do the things you want to do?
Specifically in Austin, there's a cost of education index that's supposed to ensure that every school district can access the same level of resources, and also recognizing there are cost controls that are costs that are beyond district's control in terms of how to get those services and how to access those services. This component of the funding formula, Austin has one of the lowest in the state, and we all know that Austin is incredibly expensive. The cost of living, we're probably one of the top 2, if not 3 cities in the state that has the highest cost of living, yet our CEI reflects one of the lowest in the state.
And I should be looking at the cost of education index, almost like a cost of living index, right? This is so you can pay staff to live in Austin, right? Right,
correct. And so like the basic foundation monies, like the $5,140, you know, $5,140 that is sort of the baseline of education dollars that every student would receive. I would offer that we don't have full access to that $5,140 because because we can't buy the same level of resources and support that another school district could buy with sort of a lower cost of living.
The legislature in 2017, they could not find a fix for this, and they created this commission, School Finance Commission. You are on the commission. Are you optimistic going forward? I mean, what are some of the solutions that we could see out of this, at least from your perspective? What would you like to see?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I'd like to see new money into public education. I think, you know, considering the fact of where most school districts in the state are in terms of having to sort of deal with deficit spending and budgets, just like Austin, we have a lifeline of 2 years in terms before we fully run out of our reserves to sort of operate our school operations. School districts are in desperate need of additional funding. So new money going into public education combined with taxpayer relief. I think the state's over-reliance on property taxes to fund public education is sort of, you can see it in your tax bills every day. It's hitting our taxpayers' pocket. We've all come together and we've rested on the fact that there's some really good innovative programs in school districts like full-day pre-K or dual language.
They need to be paid for.
But they need money to sustain them.
Do you feel like whatever comes out of the commission will actually lead to action at the Capitol? I know you all have gotten to know each other and have trust in each other, but do you think there will be pushback from the rest of the lawmakers or the rest of the general population to say, we want to do what the commission suggests?
You know, there might be pushbacks on a few elements, right? I mean, I didn't nail it 100% of every element change that I'd like to see in the funding formula, like accounting for future costs for inflation. I tried to make the argument that school districts shouldn't be expected to absorb that. And looking at, you know, now we're looking at eliminating the CEI because we haven't, the state hasn't appropriately updated and fully funded it. And so if the state's not going to update it, then we might as well get rid of that element. But I do think the element needs to be there. We need to account for regional cost differences at some point in time. I do think there's I think that there's general consensus and around the things that move school districts forward. I think the House and the Speaker have made it very clear that public education is an important priority, and they expect to see that in this legislative session. Is it 100%? Probably not. I mean, there are some that believe property tax relief should be the imminent goal here and not necessarily new money into public ed, or, you know, I didn't want, at the end of the day, school districts to get what was left over after property tax relief. I feel like they're both important priorities, and I think our voters really want to see some demonstrative action towards supporting public education.
Well, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
The plan to pay for Texas schools will take center stage at the Capitol, and some new people under the dome could bring different perspectives to the debate.
Education is the #1 issue in my district, and I have the most economically disadvantaged students.
We'll introduce you to one of the newest Texas lawmakers and how her experience could help others in the upcoming session. We've been introducing you to some of the new people who'll be working for you in the Texas legislature. One of them is Cheryl Cole, a Democrat who won House District 46 in Austin. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So talk to me about what life has been like since the election day until now. What are you doing to prepare for the legislature?
I'm meeting with constituents, everybody from independent school districts in Pflugerville, Manor, and Austin, and social service groups, integral care, people concerned mostly about the property taxes, and trying to map out a strategy to deal with that has already been set as the primary agenda by the Speaker.
So if you go in, you're going to say, I care about property taxes. What are some of those other issues that you're going to see or priorities going to be for you?
Well, I've always cared a lot about criminal justice, so I would like to see some of that reform and reduced sentencing. We have a long way to go in terms of dealing with our transportation issues and lack of infrastructure. I mean, it's just a district that has not had representation for a long time. And so people are very excited about having somebody to go see, you know.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about that. As you know, your predecessor, Representative Dukes, was not at the Capitol very much in the last couple of years. I mean, is there a kind of long checklist or waiting list of things that your constituents want from their state government that now I guess you have the opportunity to go and execute?
Oh, I'd say absolutely. I mean, it's not necessarily that all the issues are different than those across the, you know, the 5-county region even. I mean, central region, it's just that they haven't had representation on them. Feelings about, you know, school finance, the quality of the schools, the gentrification, just lots of issues that they just want to have a voice on.
And what do you see your role in the larger Central Texas delegation? There's a lot of new people here from Central Texas. So do you want to kind of find a niche, or are you working as a team? What's your strategy working with your fellow Central Texans?
Well, you have to work as a team. There's just no doubt about that, and there's a lot of similarities between us as a team. But we all bring a certain set of prior experiences that you want to play on to kind of be the most effective that you can. And, you know, I served on the city council for the past 10 years, and I was the mayor pro tem, and I was chair of audit and finance for the past 5 years. So I dealt a lot with property tax caps, local government issues, and I also had worked for the Texas Municipal League, and that dealt a lot with economic development and growth issues and property taxes. So I guess if you were to ask what would be my niche, it would probably be working on the specific financial side of property taxes. And I'm a CPA also, you know that. I'm a lawyer and a CPA, so I kind of bring that training to bear and part of my practice. So
nice. And it's not official yet, but it looks like there is a soon-to-be speaker, Dennis Bonnen. Have you talked to him before or recently since he's been on this quest for speaker? What's your first impression of him?
My first impression is that he is very pragmatic. He said elections matter. The agenda for this session will be public education, public education, public education. He does not see how if the lieutenant governor can talk about property tax relief and not deal with school finance. And I said, even Austin? And he said, Cheryl, even Austin. So I said, we've got to take him at his word and tee up and get ready.
Could you see yourself voting for him, and do you think all the Democrats will kind of go and support him at the end of the day?
Yes, I can see myself voting for him, especially since education is the #1 issue in my district, and I have the most economically disadvantaged students, kids, parents, or schools that need attention. So, yes.
Well, I appreciate you coming by. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
The clock is ticking on a program that helps needy Texans get health care.
I think it makes all of us wonder what's coming next, but I also know that we are all thinking about this transition.
Now, some groups are stepping up to come up with a game plan to help Texans when the money runs out, and they're trying to get state lawmakers to join them. Right now, millions of Texans have access to health care services thanks to billions of dollars of incentive payments from the federal government. But that funding runs out in 2021. Steffi Lee shows us how different groups are working now with lawmakers to come up with a game plan to keep serving Texans in need.
It's more than just providing care in a clinic, but really providing a community where patients can feel at home and get access to a range of services.
Inside the Southeast Health and Wellness Center, patients can get different screenings, but also
access to nutrition counseling and healthy education classes, Zumba, dance, really trying to attack those social drivers of health.
All made possible by delivery system reform incentive payments, or DSRIP funding, from Texas's Medicaid 1115 waiver.
A combination of local and federal funds that has allowed providers statewide to try projects over the last 7 or so years, both to improve access to care and to improve how care is delivered.
The federal health officials said this funding won't last forever.
I think it makes all of us wonder what's coming next, but I also know that we are all thinking about this transition.
Dell Medical School's experts went to the Capitol looking ahead to what the state can do starting in 2019.
So it's not like Texas needs to know by then exactly what it wants to do, but we definitely are hoping that there'll be some guidance this legislative session.
If we can achieve health with the work that we're doing for patients, then we're going to save money long term as a community, and people's lives are going to be better.
The Texas Health and Human Services Commission will have to submit a transition plan by next October to federal health officials, describing how the state plans to continue offering these services once the funding pool ends. In Austin, Steffi Lee, back to you.
Thanks, Steffi. Here's a breakdown of the timeline for this Medicaid waiver funding. The feds made $3.1 billion available from October of this year to the end of September of next year. That drops to just over $2.9 billion for that same time period in the following year. The year after that, it drops below $2.5 billion, and funding runs out in October 2021. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.